make vitamin D from UVB sunlight. That's the middle of the day, right? When the sun's above 30 degrees. So this whole thing that dermatologists are peddling around skin cancers being linked to UV radiation, it can't be. They're mutually exclusive. So that's a total myth that you need to get rid of. Like I said, be careful with the sun. If you haven't been in it for a while, you have to use more red and infrared in the morning, then you can go out in midday. But there is nothing wrong with burning except for losing some skin stem cells. I mean, yeah, it hurts when you sleep, maybe it keeps you up a little bit, your skin peels because you're losing the skin stem cells. But in my view, you personally do not get skin cancer from burning too much. You can't, because that would mean that you have high vitamin D. So we now also live in this altered world where we have microwave radiation everywhere. So you can actually get tanned, you can get lots of UV light exposure without making vitamin D if you're tanning next to your Bluetooth speaker, or next to your Wi-Fi router, or next to your phone, which is connected to Spotify. So that can actually uncouple the vitamin D synthesis process in the skin from sulfated cholesterol, because there's no water to hydrate that reaction, because the EMF is dehydrating, remember from the start of the podcast. So we've then got another layered issue in there, which is confusing people and saying, oh, but I'm tanned and I've got a skin cancer. Okay, maybe you've got too much wireless radiation around you.
That was Nathan Siles, and you've landed on the me&my Health Up podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Hartcher, a clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten your well-being, and Nathan Siles is going to be doing that just for you. We are going to smash a lot of traditional paradigms and myths associated with light, with sunlight. Nathan is an expert in the circadian rhythm and understanding how we can leverage sunlight to optimize our well-being. So tune into this episode with Nathan Siles, who has himself been through cancer and cured himself and is now thriving in a world where he is making a huge difference in terms of educating and empowering people on the circadian rhythm and the importance of light in our lives. So lighten up with Nathan Siles. Welcome on the me&my Health Up podcast. How are you, Nathan Siles?
Oh, very well, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. The webinar I watched that you presented on light really just totally flipped my paradigm around light. So I thought from that moment, I need to better understand this, and because I didn't have a great grasp of what you're sharing, and I thought my listeners probably want to understand this as well, because it was so powerful what you shared in terms of what light's done for you, what magnetism's done for you, and what water's done for you, and those three pillars on how it's really shaped where you are today, what you're doing today, your life's inspiration, your mission, your purpose. And so, first of all, I'd just love to ask you how you've arrived at what you're doing today.
Sure. So my journey started with quite a serious challenge. So when I was 8 months of age, I was diagnosed with a serious bilateral ocular cancer. So cancer on my retinas in both eyes. It's called retinoblastoma. It's quite rare. It's getting more common, unfortunately, but almost non-existent 40 years ago. So they say, genetic counselors would say that it would be mostly genetic. There is a minor predisposition that does occur in that space, but predominantly there is an environmental trigger which hits that. So there was something around 6 months. I was born into this world in Melbourne, very healthy baby, 6 months of age. There must have been some environmental trigger to trigger this. And then it left me with a deadly brain cancer if not treated. So I was lucky enough to be treated, and it got caught before it spread to the rest of my brain, because the retina is the front of the brain. I was able to hang on to about 10% of my visual acuity. So there's only a small amount of functional retina in both eyes, which most ophthalmologists will have you know that it's probably just a camera issue with the eye. So maybe you see a bit less, there's 10% vision and whatnot. But what they don't tell you is there's another part of it called the eye clock. And this mechanism is also tuned by light. So if there's not a high fidelity of light signal through the retinas, then the internal clock system's off. So anyway, as I grew up, my camera vision left me with learning Braille and typewriting, using the Braille typewriter and touch typing, very reliant on technology for my learning. So going through schooling, I was prepared to go blind. They didn't know the amount of radiation they used in my treatment. There's cataracts that get formed. So, it could block out a lot of the vision. But luckily, it gradually reduced my vision till I was maybe 7 or 8% when I was about 20. And then I had a cataract operation, took that out. So I went through schooling. I got into Melbourne University when I was 17, studied commerce, was trying to be an investment banker, eventually got there, was 23 and I was starting in investment banking. No massive health issues, just sort of would always get sick in winter, would have a bit of seasonal depression, would have the anxiety bursts and, skin conditions and things that would pop up here and there, and fatigue if I did lots of exercise. So, but I was an athlete. I was a swimmer and a soccer player for state, for Victoria. So I was able to perform still, and clearly my brain was still functioning well to get me into investment banking. And then I had a big wake-up call when I was 24. So I was about to get a promotion to go over to London to work in the London office. And I got a physical exam and I had diagnosed with testicular cancer. So that left me as a young man, thought he was invincible, with quite a reevaluation to make. So anyway, quick decision. I decided to go through conventional treatment and do complementary treatment alongside. So my conventional treatment involved the surgery and then 3 weeks of preparing for the chemotherapy so my body could recover from the surgery, and then the chemotherapy for 4 months. And then from that point onwards, I was diagnosed, I was in remission. I was said I was in remission, so cancer-free, but I didn't feel cancer-free. I lost my hair, lost my eyelashes. I was very weak. I'm 6'2" and I was 80 kilos and I went down to 55 kilos. So it sounded a little bit unusual to be diagnosed with freedom when I felt so sick and so unwell still. So none of that made sense to me. And I started researching and discovering what the chemo did to my body, following lots of different medical practitioners online, until I found one, a world-renowned neuroscientist, neurosurgeon, Dr. Jack Kruse, who everything that he said on his podcast and his webinars, I didn't understand. And I thought I knew a bit about diet, exercise, lifestyle, circadian rhythm, sleep. I didn't know anything. And so I started intently following him, and I subscribed to his private medical group, and I followed him for 4 years, during which time I went up to James Cook University and studied a diploma of health in Cairns, and eventually got lucky enough to be selected to come to his clinic in New Orleans to train under him for a year. So I was one of his students for a year, and I call it almost like my little holistic neuroscience medical degree that I did under his tutorship, and eventually learned so much about how the brain and the body works, and improved my health in every facet. I was healthier than I'd ever been when I was 26, and I realized I had to go and teach this. So I wanted to keep living the truth of nature, which he taught me, the language that nature communicates to ourselves. And so I decided to move to Mexico. So that's when I started my consulting, when I lived in the jungle in Mexico, on the beach there for 2 years. And then, a whole bunch of other turmoils around the world hit, and I found myself back in Australia, and now I'm in the Gold Coast. So educating not just doctors and practitioners, but also working directly with professional athletes to help human optimization and performance, and now building another company which is involved products, lighting products, specifically visible and non-visible lighting products, to help regulate health within the home on a subconscious level, so that people can be healthy. Especially my biggest passion is young children.
Wow, what an incredible journey you've just shared with us. Remarkable in terms of what you've been through, you've endured, you've persisted, and essentially you've taken the best from everything, and to where you are today, really empowering and adding so much value to athletes, adding so much value to myself as a practitioner, doctors, empowering them, educating them, and really making a huge difference based on your experiences and your journey, and obviously what you've learned through that journey, and educated yourself. Now you're passing on that education, and I really appreciate you now being here with the Me and My Health Up listeners to really empower them in terms of light and how they can use light to really optimize their health is my next question.
Yeah, perfect. So it's a really beautiful segue to understand one of the primary levers of nature and how it communicates to our inner nature is through the process of light. And from the sun, that's a series of electromagnetic waves from our body. That's a series of biophotons, or electric field and magnetic field emissions from our body. So we have this intimate interaction between living systems in our environment, and we replicate and sometimes even upscale the light in our environment to what we actually make and produce in terms of light inside our body. Light's the primary signaler of nature and of our inner nature. So to start there, it makes a beautiful pathway to understand the living system and how it works on a subatomic level. So when we talk about light, we're talking about visible and non-visible photons, electric and magnetic fields. So this is everything from cosmic and gamma rays, really highly excited light particles, all the way through to ultraviolet, so X-rays, ultraviolet, then we've got blue, green, red, then we've got infrared, and then we've got microwaves, radio frequencies, sound waves, and down to low frequency DC electricity, AC and then DC electricity. So FM and AM radio and your Bluetooth and your Wi-Fi are all on that longer wavelength side, less highly excited energy. And all the X-ray radiation that comes from lightning bolts, or all of our medical diagnostics are on that right side. So whereas the sunlight that reaches the Earth, that passes through the ozone layer, that hits the terrestrial Earth where we're walking across, is usually between that ultraviolet and that infrared range. So the way to understand light is that all the light that's within this range, the ultraviolet, blue, green, red, and infrared, it works with our cells to hydrate our bodies. Now, we're mostly water. The Earth's mostly water. Living systems are mostly water. Water is the stage that life dances on. So when we hydrate our body with the signal of light, we thrive. All the other signals of light outside of that spectrum, which don't reach Earth's surface except for the ones we've created. So we've created the Hadron Collider, which collides these particles and releases cosmic and gamma rays, or the northern or southern lights you can see in the North or South Pole. They're all cosmic and gamma radiation. Very short bursts, but high intensity radiation. Same as X-rays. X-rays exist in lightning bolts, lightning strikes, and very short-lived, not supposed to have a lot of exposure. But we get a lot of those that come from cathode ray tube monitors that we used to have. We also get them from fluorescent light bulbs. We get them sometimes from high-powered devices that are plugged into AC power. And these types of things are impacting our bodies and dehydrating our bodies. Same on the other side. So the other side is the microwaves, the Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi, the FM radio, AM radio, artificial sound waves, AC electricity, electric fields, power lines, transmission lines, all those things, they sit on the other side, and the sun doesn't usually emit a lot of those down to our terrestrial Earth. So therefore, they're also dehydrating our cells. So there was a study that showed that when we're born, we're about 80 to 85% water. And when we die, if we're average age 78 to 85, somewhere around there in the Western civilizations, we're about 55% water. So you can say and infer that the correlation is that death is dehydration. So we're getting too much of the wrong signals as we age, and it's impacting us worse than too many of the right signals. So firstly, we have to realize we have to get our light right, and our light is designed to come from nature, which comes from our sun. We've created these artificial lights, which we now live under indoors, from our screens, our phones, all those types of things, street lights. Every single one of these, not only does it isolate the solar spectrum and therefore have a pointed effect, just like supplementing too much with one particular supplement, but also what it does is it dehydrates the body. So we find that our life, our circadian rhythm, it really follows a day-night cycle, a light-dark cycle. And any departure from this, we realize over a period of time results in some type of dis-ease, which can manifest in a particular way. So you miss a certain signal throughout the day at a particular time, you will get a particular illness. So we're designed to wake up just before sunrise, as the sun comes up. As soon as that sun hits the horizon and starts rising up, it's full of infrared, red, green, and blue. There's no ultraviolet. As soon as it hits about between 10 and 15 degrees to the horizon, that's when the UVA comes in. That's a really important signal for the body, because it's a signal to tell your melatonin in your brain and all of your cells to start regenerating for that night's sleep. So you prepare your sleep by getting exposure to light in the morning. As the sun keeps going, it gets to 30 degrees to the horizon. Then the UVB gets added to the cacophony of symphony of frequencies. And that UVB is then there to upregulate our immune system through vitamin D function. So it's a stressor from nature that's a hormetic stressor. Hormetic means good stressor, something that makes you positively adapt. And it allows the body to become more resilient and more complex because you're capturing a higher powered sunlight. Then as the sun hits its solar noon, it has another effect where it's quite strong. And so your body's trying to get more resilient during that time. And then as you go towards the end of the day, it hits 30 degrees, UVB goes away, then 10 degrees, UVA goes away, and then sunset, and then infrared, blue and green and red go away. And then we need darkness. But over the last 2 million years, humans have evolved firelight. So we've been able to hack nature so that we can eat later, or so that we can socialize later, or have our community activities later, or have connection time later by using firelight. So firelight is predominantly red. It's a little bit of yellow and orange in there, but it's mostly red. And so this light, we're actually able to adapt to post-sunset without affecting our melatonin and cortisol rhythm, which controls most of the pathways and genetic expression in the body, as John Hodgenesh discovered in 2014. And in 2017, there was a Nobel Prize that was awarded for the molecular mechanisms of the circadian rhythm, which described this even further, if you're interested. So we're designed to have these beautiful signals, which then also play into the ultradian rhythms, which are intra-hour rhythms. So that's like appetite, bowel movements, those types of things. And the infradian rhythms, which are like things like the menstrual cycle. So the circadian rhythm helps regulate all of these biologic rhythms and keep everything in a beautiful dance, a beautiful balance, so that your hormones work properly, your nervous system is regulated properly, your sleep, your genetic expression, and all of the things. And it's all based around light signals.
Wow, that was beautifully well put and described. I was certainly picturing what you were saying through, I guess, the actions you're showing. So those watching the video, Nathan was very animated. So I suggest you tune into the YouTube to see his animations and how he was describing it in an animated way. But he did it such a good way in terms of audio that you'll still get a gist of what he was saying in the podcast, in the audio version. Nathan, in terms of from the listeners and the listeners here, pretty much office workers, they've got careers. There's obviously some outdoor workers that listen to my episode, but predominantly indoor. And they wake up, they could be working from home. They probably don't venture outside unless they go outside to exercise. They're working under these artificial lights most of the day. And at the end of the day, they may not see much natural sunlight, particularly if they're in a room with not much windows and not much natural light coming in. So obviously you mentioned that's going to have consequences around health implications because they're not getting the light exposure throughout the day. So what do you recommend? How should someone that's a typical office worker then go about changing habits and getting better exposure to the various exposure during different parts of the day? How do you recommend they do that?
Anthony, it's a great question. And there's good news and bad news here. And look, the good news is that there's a huge push towards circadian lighting. So including the company that I'm working with, we're building a whole bunch of indoor lights which change spectrum throughout the day. So soon enough, if we get the right partnerships, we'll have these in offices, and offices will have lights that actually follow the Kelvin temperature of the day. So it will start off a little bit warmer around sunrise, and it will go to a little bit more white light, which is predominantly blue, during the middle portion of the day. And as it heads towards 5, 6, 7 p.m., whenever sunset is, it will then go a little bit warmer, and then our lights will then turn red afterwards. So you'll always have light. So the answer is you don't have to go back to living in the Stone Age, living in the dark, using candles. There's a huge push for this. So it's coming within the next 5 to 10 years. It'll be everywhere. So that's the good news. The bad news is that blue light, specifically the stuff that comes from your downlights, your hi-hats, your compact fluorescents, most bulbs, these types of things, they're all a signal to the body to tell it, hey, it's solar noon and it's the middle of summer. So just remember, next time you walk under any white light, any LED that's white, even if it's a warm white, it's still telling the body that it's the middle of the day, it's solar noon. And when it's the middle of the day, it's solar noon and it's summer, your body is designed to be either moving around really fast, it's designed to search for food, it's designed to digest food, it's designed to send a lot of energy to the muscle tissue. So this is what happens. Blue light is that signaling process which raises your blood glucose, and then it affects your insulin rhythms, independent of food. So you can get diabetes independent of food just from a bad light environment. Now, what can people do when they have a job that precludes them from spending time outside? I'm lucky I've structured my life so I can do that. Not everyone has that luxury. So think of it like a clock. Every time you look at the clock, you know exactly what time it is. Now you go about your day and you do your tasks, you do your errands, and you check your clock again an hour later. Before you check it, you try and guess what time it is. You'd guess maybe 55 minutes, maybe an hour and 5 minutes, and it's an hour exactly. Okay, cool. So I'm a little bit out. Now, if you go and do a 3-hour errand and then you try and guess the time before you look at it, you might be 10 minutes out. If you go into a 6-hour errand, you may be 30 minutes out. So your body slowly loses its circadian rhythm unless it's tuned consistently. So the key here is to get 5-minute exposures every hour if you can, or a 10-minute exposure every 2 hours, or a 15-minute exposure every 4 hours. So if you can try and get your touch to nature in any way, your eyes, skin, aerodigestive tract, and gut, right? Your lungs and gut. If you can get these exterior surfaces that all contain photoreceptors, they all will work with the biophysics of the body, because what happens on the surfaces controls what happens underneath. So they'll get the signal, as much exposure as you can to a natural light source or a new circadian lighting source. Then your body will have that signal. It will know, okay, it's this time. And guess what? At midday, you know that your pancreatic enzymes are going to start secreting because you're ready for lunch. Or at 9 a.m., you know your testosterone's at its peak for the men. And so therefore, you know that that's time to turn yourself into motivation. So you want all these signals throughout the day, and we're not designed to live in this stagnant mind state or body state. So they're not strong feelings, but they're subtle changes throughout the day. So just to give your listeners a little bit of an idea, if you have thyroid issues, it's generally the first 3 hours of the day that you've missed, and that's a chronic issue that you've had problems with. Generally, if you have musculoskeletal issues, you're missing the last 2 or 3 hours a day and maybe the first hour. If you have any type of cancer, you're missing that wedge in the middle of the day. If you have sleep issues, you're missing that about an hour after sunrise to about 3 or 4 hours after sunrise. So these windows are associated with particular conditions, and it's about spotting what your proclivity is. Is it weight management? Is it a particular thyroid condition or an adrenal condition? And then find out which parts of sunlight you've missed for that particular day and make a little effort, even if it's 5 minutes. Give your body an inch, it'll take a mile. So do what you can with what you have. But the most important signals for the entire day: sunrise, solar noon, and sunset. So make sure you get those.
Oh, fantastic. And so well explained and simple to apply, really. I mean, finding that 5 minutes each hour is, I guess you could apply that Pomodoro principle, in terms of chunking your work down into blocks and then taking that break outside, getting the sun exposure at that time of the day, and then getting back onto the next block of indoor work or whatever, or maybe go for a walk and talk with your team outside. So I was just thinking, whilst you were explaining the conditions associated with various parts of the day and lack of that sun exposure, I was just thinking around mental health, because mental health is the tipping point at the moment. Given that we've just been through the pandemic, we've been really isolated around social connection. We've spent probably more time indoors and not being able to go outdoors and things like that. And so is there a time of the day that people are missing if they're, any type of mental health, or is it particular to a condition of mental health for a time of day?
Yeah, totally. So it is particular based on, there are broad categories, but it is relatively particular. The thing that everyone needs to really understand is that when it comes to a mental health condition, and you won't hear this from any conventional doctor, or mostly even integrative medicine doctors, they're not fully aware of this because it's to do with the clock timing in your body. So anytime you have a mental issue, whether it's a depressive situation or a schizophrenic situation, you have an altered time perception. So an ADHD brain, it can't estimate time very well, and it thinks time's flying really, really fast. So it's hyperproductive because time's flying. So what they've found in studies is that an ADHD brain will actually overestimate time, and they'll get more done, but they'll complain that there's not enough time. Whereas you have depression and it's the opposite. Have you ever heard of anyone going through depression in your life and they say, oh, why, I'm so bored. Why can't time just speed up? This sucks. Like whatever it is. So it's an altered perception that's slowing down time and normally slowing biologic time is a great thing because you slow aging. And in many ways, that's what depression is. It is a self-preservation act to slow down your biologic time, because if you had have kept going as fast as you did, you would have died faster. So all of these mental health conditions, just like physical conditions, have a lot of wisdom, and they're adaptive processes. So chronic fatigue prevents you from having a heart attack. Thyroid conditions prevent you from having a cancer. And diabetes and obesity from excess metabolic syndrome and things like that. So, everything has its train stops, and mental health conditions, which are blowing up everywhere. And in my opinion, there's no great solutions. And I don't believe medication should be the first point of call. But brain perception of time is a really important phenomenon to research. And it's very well published, from an autistic brain to an ADHD brain to an OCD brain. All of these conditions have that characteristic. Now, in terms of addressing your question, specifically time of day for these mental conditions, like I said, they're challenging, and in terms of they're in categories, but most of the time, people who have these challenges, they can't handle strong solar noon sunlight. And the reason is because they are generally chronically sunlight deficient. Their semiconductive proteins in their body are so light deficient that their body's strategy has evolved this mental coping mechanism, which has allowed them to thrive in their own particular way in their current environmental conditions, making the choices that they have been making. So the most important part of this is they get early morning light, because that's a softer light. Remember, less than 10 degrees to the horizon, when the sun's there, it doesn't have UV in it. So no one should be scared of any type of solar radiation in the first hour to 2 hours of sunlight, depending on where you are in the world. If you're in Tasmania, it's probably the first 2 hours. If you're in Cairns, it's probably the first hour that there's no UV. So this time it sets your neurotransmitter function, and it lowers the inflammation in your brain. It clears out the misfolded proteins, which are associated with all neurodegenerative conditions. And it allows the healthy transport of nutrients and minerals and peptides through the brain, so that you can function optimally. So the way that you go, so that's step one for mental health. Step two is, once you have had enough of that, let's say 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks of watching sunrise every day, then you can start building in the stronger sunlight. Now, what we do know is dopamine is one of the key neurotransmitters in most of these conditions, either excess or too little. So too little, Parkinson's and depression; too much, schizophrenia, right? So the way to regulate dopamine properly is to have adequate UV light exposure, because dopamine is created from tyrosine, an aromatic amino acid, working with UV light. So we need these types of light. Now, every time there's UV light, there's always infrared in nature. The sun is 51% red and infrared light all day long. So any light that's ever used anywhere needs red and infrared light accompanied with it. So that's a fail-safe. So anyone who's trying to sell you any vitamin D lamps or UV lamps or blue light, if you're under blue lights or any of these sort of things, you need to add the red and infrared back into it. So when I say UV light works to build dopamine, I say red and infrared plus UV light works to build dopamine in the neurotransmitter network through the brain. Same as serotonin, same as melatonin, same as T3, same as NAD. Every single one of those are built from red, infrared, and UV light exposure on the eye and the skin. And so these are the things you want to slowly get your body back into building slowly, whilst you're doing that for early morning light exposure, so you can get your body used to it and be able to upregulate your brain function and get rid of that brain fog and find a strategy to get out of the rut that you're in, or to calm down from the rush and the hurry that you're in.
You raise a great point in terms of cancer's predominantly lack of solar noon sun. And then you said most of mental health is because of the lack of solar noon sun. And we're told from an early age to get out of the solar noon sun. It is the most dangerous and most, skin cancer generative, and that's probably what the driver is to prevent skin cancer. Now, this is where I sort of had a flick of switch when you were sharing this in the previous webinar that I attended. And I was thinking, wow, what a shift in paradigm in terms of, the kids are playing under all this shade and sun cream, lathered up with sun cream with hats and everything. And we have this, these mental health conditions, arising in teenage years or even before teenage years, early adolescence. And then, cancer's even popping up in children and whatnot. And I'm thinking, wow, you've said there's this correlation here. And so what have you got to say around the afternoon sun exposure, and how do we do it properly?
Yeah, it's great to understand sort of where a lot of these myths have come from. So I'll just bust a few quickly so your listeners will understand. You can go back and look this up. So sunglasses were invented and become mainstream around 1929 to 1935. Around that time, sunglasses became our first barrier for our eyes to filter out the ultraviolet spectrum. A lot of health conditions blew up after that because our major circadian oscillator, which is our suprachiasmatic nucleus, our SCN in the brain, sits there right at the front of the hypothalamus, which is our master clock, controls all the peripheral clocks in front of every single gene in every single cell in our body, tunes to that SCN right here. So it's now getting an altered light signal, an altered time signal, and it's now leading to global issues within the body and a lowered level of energy and information from nature. So we're already feeling a disconnection there. We already had clothes that disconnected us prior to that. So that was our first. Then we decided to put glasses on, sunglasses on. Then we decided to put sunscreen on our skin to cover our largest organ, our skin. So we're now filtering the spectrum on our skin. Once again, we have neuropsin photoreceptors. So this is a UV light detector, specifically protein designed in the body, specifically designed to pay attention to UV light signals. So it's on the cornea, it's in all our skin, it's in our gut, it's in our lungs. Why would nature or God or evolution put it there? Why would it put UV light there if you're not designed to receive it? So the fact that people are not able to receive UV light, they have skin breakouts, they have burning, they have all these types of issues, it means, once again, just like the mental illness stuff, you're not ready to see that light. You have to do more mornings before you can get out there. Now, it's almost like a little bit scary when, your body's not strong enough to be able to handle nature, let alone another stressor on top of that, like all the work stresses or exercise pressures that we have to try and be fit and athletic and, all these other things that stress us out. We can't even handle just living with nature like we've done for 200,000 years. So it's a knock on nature's door saying, hey, just remember, you've departed too much from nature and you need to come back to it. So that's the clothing, the sunglasses, and the skin. But what happens is when you block one surface and not another, is you then create a circadian mismatch. So inflammatory pathways begin to upregulate when your brain perceives a particular time of day. Let's say you got sunglasses on, your brain now says, oh, it's early morning or it's late afternoon. Your skin goes, oh no, it's midday. I'm sending all the signals to the brain to secrete cortisol and all the other awesome hormones that you need during midday. But the brain's going, no, I'm just waking up. I'm not hungry yet. Down-regulates metabolism, down-regulates appetite. And so you've got this conflicting signal inside the body, which is then causing huge amounts of peptide dysregulation, gut microbiome destruction, all this types of stuff. And this is where you have huge amounts of issues related to autoimmunity, which has popped up out of nowhere. So the body fighting itself because you're not letting it have a coherent signal. So there's that. The other thing is you'll never find a skin cancer case of someone that has high vitamin D. Now we make vitamin D from UVB sunlight. That's the middle of the day, right? When the sun's above 30 degrees. So this whole thing that dermatologists are peddling around skin cancers being linked to UV radiation, it can't be. They're mutually exclusive. So that's a total myth that you need to get rid of. Like I said, be careful with the sun. If you haven't been in it for a while, you have to use more red and infrared in the morning. Then you can go out in midday. But there is nothing wrong with burning except for losing some skin stem cells. I mean, yeah, it hurts when you sleep. Maybe it keeps you up a little bit. Your skin peels because you're losing the skin stem cells. But in my view, you personally do not get skin cancer from burning too much. You can't. because that would mean that you have high vitamin D. So we now also live in this altered world where we have microwave radiation everywhere. So you can actually get tanned. You can get lots of UV light exposure without making vitamin D if you're tanning next to your Bluetooth speaker or next to your Wi-Fi router or next to your phone, which is connected to Spotify. So that can actually uncouple the vitamin D synthesis process in the skin from sulfated cholesterol, because there's no water to hydrate that reaction, because the EMF is dehydrating, remember from the start of the podcast. So we've then got another layered issue in there, which is confusing people and saying, oh, but I'm tanned and I've got a skin cancer. Okay, maybe you've got too much wireless radiation around you. Maybe you've got a Wi-Fi router in your house, or maybe you're not sunbaking on the earth and you're doing it on a rooftop on concrete where you're not grounded. So you haven't got a complete electrical signal, so you're burning much faster. So you can find that I'm up on my deck here. When I'm laying down on my grass, just 2 meters down there, it takes me an extra hour to get red in the sun than it does up here, because I'm already transmuting all the energy and making this beautiful, beautiful electrical current through my body when I'm grounded. When I'm up here, my skin goes a little bit red, a little bit faster. So it's the same thing with all of that. So in the afternoons, to address your question, it's a time where the light exposure is not strongest. It's strongest during solar noon, but generally it's the time that after the sun's been up for a period of time, your body has absorbed already a decent amount of photonic radiation in a good way, if it's full spectrum, without sunscreen, without contact lenses, without skin covering, without any of that. And so then in the afternoon, you notice the effects more just because you've got your dose for the day already. So it's actually not worse in the afternoon. It's just that it seems worse because people don't have the resilience. So for me, I tested this, right? So I'm white boy, Melbourne, German, mum, very non-equatorial. I can show you photos. I can send you them later of me when I was going through my chemo. I was pasty white ghost gum. Now, you look at me, I'm tanned now. When I lived over in Mexico, I had to prove it. UV index 15, 20th latitude. I laid out at the beach the entire day, going back, forth, back, rolling on my back and on my stomach, on my back, my stomach. I didn't get burnt. I didn't peel. I woke up the next day. I didn't have any soreness. And that was 6 years ago. So I've done this for the last 8 years. The amount of cholesterol that I've eaten and the amount of sunlight that I've got, I should have multiple cancers, multiple heart attacks, multiple organ failures. I don't, because they're all myths. So the more sunlight you can get, the better. Just be safe with it and get the morning stuff before you get the midday stuff.
So what I'm seeing a lot in practice is high cholesterol. So it seems to be like it's just emerging everywhere. Either I'm just one practitioner that's seeing a lot of cases, but it seems that I'm hearing in conversations with family members, friends, that the doctor said they've got concerning cholesterol, and there's that, knowing cholesterol's the backbone to making hormones, the backbone to making vitamin D, and I'm thinking, is there, through your studies, have you found some sort of connection with high LDL cholesterol and the lack of certain light exposure?
Yeah, no, completely. You're exactly right. So LDL cholesterol is not the bad cholesterol. There is no bad cholesterol. So medical practitioners will have you think that there's a good and a bad. There was the massive meta-analysis study that was done, I think it was 30 years ago, busted that myth already. So in many ways, it's old news, but it hasn't bled into the medical system at the moment. So HDL cholesterol has been linked with high levels of HDL cholesterol. It's been linked with longevity. What they found in the study is that low levels of LDL cholesterol was associated with the earliest deaths. So you don't want low LDL cholesterol. We know that. Now, the debate they have is there's high LDL cholesterol, which is causing harm. So in many ways, it's like blaming if you got a burning house, it's like blaming the doormat that you find there as the reason that the house burnt down. So it's actually, it's a total misnomer to go and blame LDL cholesterol. When you dive down into it, and every medical practitioner who does LDL cholesterol tests on their patients should be doing this. They should be looking down at the smaller versions of cholesterol, so the VLDL and the SDLDL, so the small dense LDL particles are the ones that have been sitting there for a long time. Now, these small particles are very dense, and they can tend to when in combination with inflammatory cytokines, they can cause plaque issues and actual clogged arteries in the body, in veins. So this is where we can get issues to do with cholesterol. It's the small, dense LDL. The VLDL, which is that fluffy, beautiful cholesterol that turns into all our sex steroid hormones, it's there to sulfate in the skin so that we can produce our immune system powering vitamin D. This cholesterol is actually incredibly positive for the body. It's super beneficial to have. And when you have high levels of it, it shows that you haven't had enough sunlight, because sunlight sulfates the cholesterol. So this is where most people struggle with high cholesterol. Is you'll find their skin's quite pale. Now, the cholesterol in the skin is really important. You said a specific type of light for this cholesterol excess. Well, it's actually all light. UV light sulfates cholesterol much faster than all the other wavelengths of light, but all sunlight can sulfate cholesterol and can turn cholesterol into all of the other biomolecules that it needs to turn into. So as well as the trapped light inside the body, it does the same thing. So cholesterol in the skin is actually designed to be seasonally changing, just like our omega-3s in our skin. So in summer, we're designed to have more LDL cholesterol, more HDL cholesterol, and we're designed to have more omega-6 in our cell membranes. The reason why is because omega-6 works better with that seasonal cycle, as well as cholesterol, HDL cholesterol works better with sulfur metabolism, and HDL cholesterol has more electrons to capture the light in the cell membranes during summer. Now, when we go to winter, our metabolism turns from a sulfur-based protein semiconductive system to a nitrogen-based semiconductive system, where nitric oxide and nitrogen transport is used much more. Now, this is where our LDL cholesterol comes in. So LDL cholesterol, I flipped it the wrong way. HDL cholesterol is in winter with nitrogen. LDL cholesterol is in summer with sulfur. So there's more electrons in the HDL to capture the scarcity of light during winter, and there's less electrons in LDL cholesterol to capture the excess of light that's available in summer. So if you have excess low density lipoprotein, LDL, you just need to get a lot more light, and especially the midday light, which will then functionally turn LDL cholesterol into all the other beautiful biomarkers. And in the same breath, it's important to look at your inflammatory levels. So in clinic, you'd measure a HSCRP, highly sensitive C-reactive protein, or an HbA1c, or interleukins, or any of these other cytokines. And you'd look at those and you'd go, okay, if a person has high inflammatory markers and high LDL cholesterol, then you've got a case for a little bit of potential danger there. And I guarantee that same person is light deficient. When I say light, I mean all light, morning, midday, evening, all of it. And so it's important to remedy that root cause first before you touch any of the biochemistry with any crazy medications, statins, things like that. The only reason statins work is because they help lower SD-LDL, the small dense LDL. So in some ways they do work because they do that, but they just deplete you of all the fuel to create all the hormones. So it's a double-edged sword when you try and attack something from a biochemistry standpoint without looking at the biophysics context.
Well, Nathan, you've busted so many myths thus far on the episode, and my mind is just blowing with the amount of myth busting you've shared. And I'm sure the listeners are also just shifting paradigms. You're obviously really empowering and enlightening their well-being through what you've shared today. Just so the listeners that are really engaged and following what you're saying and think, I could do with a hell of a lot more, I'd love a bit of more support or consulting with you. How can they best connect with you, Nathan?
Yeah, look, the best way to go about it is to go on itsnowyou.com, itsnowyou. This is my consulting part of my job, my love, my life. It's where you can find a lot of blogs. You can find my previous podcasts. You can find lots of information that I've brought together and built upon Dr. Jack Kruse's work, Dr. Gerald Pollack's work, and Dr. Nick Lane's work, Dr. Diedrich Klinghart's work. All these guys are geniuses in their own rights, and they have places that you can go to learn much, much more if you want to go very deep on these sides. if you want to get a greater understanding of how nature works, and if you want to learn how your body works, there's so much educational material out there, but also on my website through the blog section and these types of areas. I do personal consulting on a very scarce level. I really only deal with cancer patients these days who are usually stage 3 or stage 4, so they're quite severe, who desperately need help because they're the ones that I can find the most help, where most people have left them alone. But if you do have any conditions or concerns that you're looking into and you think that after this podcast they're light related, you can reach out to me on my website, send me an inquiry in there. I usually always reply within a day, and if we want to do a consult together, if you say that you've spoken with Anthony, you're in this community, I can try and add you in on a priority order into my consulting area. So I'm writing 2 books. I've got 2 businesses. I'm building a lot of health products and things, and I'm working collaboratively with professional athletes over in the US. So I travel a lot, I work a lot, and I don't have a huge amount of capacity, but I'm definitely open to people if they really need it and they feel very motivated. I'm definitely there for you.
Thank you for sharing all that useful resource information. I'll make sure that those resources are linked in the show notes. And Nathan, I really appreciate your time. I know it's really valuable. You've really empowered and enlightened the well-being of these listeners. Pleased to hear what you've had to say and how you've shared it and articulated it in a way that they can make a difference in their lives around introducing more light. You've made it really simple in terms of getting that 5 minutes of exposure every hour. It's very achievable for most of us. And as you said, if you can't get it, you miss an hour, over a 2-hour period, make sure you get 10 minutes. So I really like how you've simplified, what we need to do for the listeners. It is straightforward, and it can really help with, related health conditions you shared in terms of what spectrum of light they might be deficient in based on certain health conditions. So really appreciate you coming on today and spending the time and really educating the listeners of Me&my Health Up.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, Anthony. I'm really happy to help. And remember, reconnect with nature, connect with nature inside yourself, and block that artificial light whenever you can, and you'll protect your timing in your body.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of Me&my Health Up. If you found this really insightful and you know someone out there that could really benefit around what Nathan's spoken to today, then please share the episode. I'd really like it to get out to people that it can help. So please share it if you know of anyone that could really benefit in listening to Nathan's wisdom. So thank you, listeners, and thanks once again, Nathan.
Thanks, Anthony.
Podcast disclaimer. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or professional advice and are provided for general information purposes only. All care is taken in the preparation of the information in this podcast. Connected Wellness Proprietary Limited, operating under the brand Me&my Health Up, does not make any representations or give any warranties about its accuracy, reliability, completeness, or suitability for any particular purpose. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it are not to be used as a substitute for professional, medical, psychological, psychiatric, or any other mental health care or healthcare in general. Me&my Health Up recommends you seek the advice of a doctor or qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Inform your doctor of any changes that you may to your lifestyle and discuss these with your doctor. Do not disregard medical advice or delay visiting a medical professional because of something you hear in this podcast. This podcast has been carefully prepared on the basis of current information. Changes in circumstances after publication may affect the accuracy of this information. To the maximum extent permitted by the law, Me&my Health Up disclaims any such representations or warranties to the completeness, accuracy, merchantability, or fitness for purpose of this podcast and will not be liable for any expenses, losses, damages incurred, indirect or consequential damages or costs that may be incurred as a result of the information being inaccurate or incomplete in any way and for any reason. No part of this podcast can be reproduced, redistributed, published, copied, or duplicated in a form without prior permission of Me&my Health Up.